maid's daughter flashed a secret distress signal only a trained police dog could decode, and the animal's explosive reaction froze the entire terminal. At first glance, it looked like routine, another tidal rush inside Grand Central. Shoes scraping marble, voices stacking into one relentless hum. But in the middle of all that noise, a quiet war had already begun, one no one saw. A small girl being dragged by a woman with a polished smile. A hand too tight, a pace too fast. And then, the signal. A subtle, trembling pattern tapped against her own leg. A private code from a dying grandfather to a child who might one day need to be saved without speaking. Blue, the K9, stopped cold. Officer David Miller tugged. "What is it, boy?" He refused to move. This isn't just a story about a kidnapping stopped in a train station. It's the story of how a forgotten soldier's code detonated inside the crowd, and what that code uncovered next. And before I forget, where are you watching from today? Leave a comment below. Enjoy the story. A small, blonde girl was about to be lost forever in the crowd, but she held a secret from her grandfather, an old soldier's last hope. And the only one who might understand it was not even human. The main concourse of the Grand Central Terminal was a river of noise. Thousands of footsteps clicked and shuffled across the polished marble floors. Voices echoed, rising to the high, arched ceiling and blending into a steady, anxious hum. It was the sound of a city in a hurry. Officer David Miller stood near the grand staircase, a calm island in the middle of the rushing water. He adjusted his cap, his eyes scanning the crowd with a practiced, easy gaze. Beside him, breathing softly, was his partner, K9 Officer Blue. Blue was a magnificent German shepherd. His coat was a deep black and tan. His sharp, intelligent eyes missed nothing. They had been partners for 6 years. 6 years of walking these floors. 6 years of watching people run for trains, greet loved ones, or say painful goodbyes. Their bond was built in silence. It was built on long night shifts, endless training drills, and a few sudden moments of pure, adrenaline-fueled terror. David trusted Blue more than he trusted most people. The dog's honesty was absolute. "Just another Monday, boy?" David murmured, his hand resting lightly on Blue's head. Blue's ear flicked back, acknowledging the touch. His tail gave a single, lazy wag. His job was not to chase. His job was to know. He was a sensory specialist, trained to detect the invisible, the things humans tried to hide. But most days, his job was just to be present, a reassuring symbol of safety. The morning rush was peaking. A loudspeaker announced a delay for the 10:30 to Boston. A wave of groans rippled through the nearby crowd. An elderly woman, her face a map of wrinkles, struggled with a heavy suitcase. As she tried to pull it, her ticket slipped from her hand and fluttered to the floor. Before she could bend down, David was there. He picked up the ticket and handed it to her with a warm smile. "Easy there, ma'am. Let me help you with that bag." "Oh, thank you, young man," she breathed, her voice frail. She looked at Blue, who sat patiently, watching the interaction. "My goodness, is he friendly?" "He's all business on the job, ma'am," David said, easily lifting her bag onto a nearby bench. "But he's got a good heart." "He looks so serious," she said, patting her chest. "He's just watching," David replied, "making sure everyone's safe. You have a good trip." The woman thanked him again and moved on. David returned to his post. His gaze swept the terminal. He saw a businessman spill coffee on his tie. He saw 2 young college students laughing and sharing headphones. He saw a mother trying to wrangle 3 restless toddlers. Everything was normal. Everything was routine. But experience had taught David that routine was a dangerous word. Danger never sent an invitation. It just appeared. It hid in the ordinary. It looked just like everyone else, right up until the moment it didn't. Blue, who had been relaxed, suddenly lifted his head. His posture didn't change, not in a way anyone else would notice. But David felt it. A sudden, subtle tension. The dog's breathing pattern changed. It was no longer a relaxed pant. It was a series of short, sharp inhales. His nose was working. "What is it?" David whispered. Blue didn't bark or growl. He just stared, his head tilted, his ears locking forward like twin radar dishes. He was focusing on something deep in the crowd, moving toward the west platforms. David followed his partner's gaze. At first, he saw nothing, just a blur of travelers. He scanned the faces. Tired, anxious, bored. Then he saw her. A woman in a sharp, expensive-looking gray coat. She was walking fast. Too fast. She held the hand of a little girl, pulling her along. The girl was small, maybe 7 or 8 years old, with blonde hair that fell in tangled waves over her shoulders. David watched them. On the surface, it was just a mother in a hurry. Maybe they were late for a train. But David's instincts, honed by years on the job, were whispering. The woman's grip on the child's hand was not a gentle hold. It was a clamp. Her knuckles were white. The little girl, Anna, was stumbling to keep up. Her head was down. She wore a simple dress and small, worn-out sneakers. They looked old, out of place with the woman's expensive coat. Blue took one step forward. He let out a low, quiet woof of air. It was a sound of deep uncertainty. He was smelling something. Not drugs, not explosives. He was smelling fear. Pure, sharp, and chemical. David's blood slowed down, his focus sharpening. He watched the little girl. She looked pale, exhausted. Her eyes were wide and glassy, darting around the terminal. She wasn't looking at the high ceiling or the bright lights. She was looking for an escape. The woman, Eleanor, pulled her harder. "Walk faster, Anna. We cannot miss this." Her voice was a hiss, sharp and brittle. Anna stumbled. She looked up at the woman, her face pale. I need to use the bathroom." "No," Eleanor snapped. "We don't have time. You can go on the train. Now walk." The harshness of the word, the cold anger in it, hit David like a slap. He had a daughter. He knew how a parent spoke to a child, even a frustrated one. This was not that. This was something else. This was control. Deep in Anna's terrified mind, a memory surfaced. Her real mother, Mary, hugging her goodbye just that morning. Mary wore her simple blue maid's uniform, her hands rough from cleaning. "Be a good girl for Mrs. Vance, honey," Mary had said, kissing her forehead. "She's just taking you to the museum for the day while I work. I'll pick you up tonight." Mrs. Vance, the woman who employed her mother, the woman who had always been so nice, the woman who was now pulling her, hard, toward a train her mother knew nothing about. "Where are we going?" Anna had asked an hour ago, her voice small. "This isn't the museum." "A surprise," Eleanor Vance had said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "A wonderful long trip." Now, terror was a cold knot in Anna's stomach. This was wrong. It was all wrong. She thought of her grandfather. Sarge, he insisted everyone call him. He was an old man, straight as a flagpole, with eyes that saw everything. A legendary war veteran. He lived in a small, tidy house and smelled like coffee and soap. He was the one who taught her the games. "The world is a tricky place, Anna Bug," Sarge had told her just last summer, sitting on his porch. He held up his hand. "If you are ever scared, and you can't make a sound, if someone is telling you to be quiet, you use this." He tapped his knee. 3 quick taps. A pause. 3 quick taps. "It's an old soldier's signal," he'd said, his voice gentle but firm. "It means I am here. I am in trouble. It's a question and an answer, all in one. You just keep doing it. Someone will see. The right someone will see." Now, in the loud, bright terminal, Anna was desperate. Her throat was tight with fear. She couldn't scream. Eleanor's fingers were digging into her arm. She looked around. Her eyes, wide and swimming with unshed tears, passed over the hundreds of people. Then she saw him. A policeman. He was tall. And beside him, a big, beautiful dog. The dog was looking right at her. Anna's free hand was shaking. She pressed it against the side of her own leg. She was terrified, but her grandfather's words were clear in her head. The right someone will see. She began to tap. It was a small, frantic movement, barely noticeable, just a little girl fidgeting. David Miller almost missed it. He was watching the woman's face, her nervous, bird-like glances toward the police officer. But Blue didn't miss it. The dog's focus, which had been on the woman's scent of fear, snapped to the girl's hand. He saw the rhythm. He saw the pattern. Blue was trained for patterns. Patterns in scent, patterns in behavior. This was a pattern. It was desperate. It was deliberate. Blue's posture changed. He stiffened, his head lowering slightly. And then, he did something he was trained never to do on patrol. He let out a low, anxious whine. The sound was sharp in the noisy terminal. Several people turned to look. David's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. The 1%. "What is it, boy?" David whispered again, his eyes locked on the girl. He saw the tapping. He saw the rhythm. It wasn't a code he knew. It wasn't Morse. But it was something. It was a signal. Eleanor Vance saw David watching. She saw his focus. Panic flashed in her eyes. She jerked Anna's arm. "Stop that. Stop fidgeting," she hissed. She began to walk faster, trying to melt back into the river of people. But Blue took another step. The whine in his throat grew louder, turning into a low, rumbling growl. It was not a growl of aggression. It was a growl of alert. It was a demand. "Stop. Something is wrong." David put his hand on Blue's leash. "Okay, partner. I see it. Let's go." He began to move, not running, but walking with a purpose that cut through the crowd. He angled his path to intersect with theirs, calm and non-threatening. "Excuse me, ma'am," David called out, his voice polite but firm. Eleanor flinched but didn't stop. "Ma'am," David said, louder this time. "Officer Miller, I need you to stop for a moment." Eleanor froze. She turned around slowly, pulling Anna behind her leg like a shield. She forced a bright, brittle smile. "Officer, is there a problem?" she asked, her voice high and shaky. "We're terribly late for our train." "Just a routine passenger check, ma'am," David said, stopping a few feet away. He kept his body language open, his hands visible. But Blue was not casual. The German shepherd had moved, planting himself firmly between David and the woman. He sat, rigid as a statue, his eyes locked on the little girl hiding behind the woman's coat. Anna had stopped tapping. She was frozen, her small hand clutching the fabric of Eleanor's coat. "What's wrong with your dog?" Eleanor demanded, her smile faltering. He's growling. "He's scaring my daughter." David looked past the woman, his eyes finding Anna's. He softened his voice. "Hey there, sweetheart. What's your name?" Anna looked at the floor. She said nothing. "Answer the officer, Annie," Eleanor said, her fingers digging into the girl's shoulder. "Tell him your name is Annie." The girl flinched. She didn't speak. And then Blue did the last thing David ever expected. The dog, trained for 6 years to maintain a professional distance, broke his sit command. He took 2 slow steps forward. He lay down on the marble floor, putting his head on his paws. He looked directly at Anna, and he whined. It was not a sound of distress. It was a sound of comfort. It was the sound he made when David's own daughter was sick. It was a soft, heartbreaking sound that said, "I see you. I am here." The reaction was instant. The little girl, Anna, who had been silent and frozen, burst into tears. It was not a small cry. It was a desperate, choking sob that she had clearly been holding back for hours. Eleanor's face turned white with fury. "Now look what you've done. You've terrified her." But David wasn't looking at Eleanor. He was looking at the dog's shocking, gentle reaction. And he was looking at the little girl who was not crying because she was scared of the dog. She was crying because, for the first time all day, she felt safe. "Ma'am," David said, and all the politeness was gone from his voice. It was cold, hard, and full of authority. "I'm going to have to ask you to step over to the wall with me. Right now." The terminal was a sea of anonymous faces. Most people hurried past, oblivious to the small, intense drama unfolding near the staircase. They were in their own worlds, focused on their own destinations. But for David, Anna, and Eleanor, the world had shrunk to this single, vibrating point. "I will not be treated this way," Eleanor said, her voice shaking with a mix of fear and manufactured rage. "I am a private citizen. You have no right." "I have a K9 alert, ma'am," David said, his voice flat and steady. It was the voice he used when there was no room for argument. "My partner is a highly trained officer. His alert gives me all the right I need." He gestured with his head to a small alcove near the transit police substation. It was out of the main flow of traffic, quieter. "Please, over here. We won't cause a scene if you cooperate." Eleanor's face hardened. She knew she was trapped. To argue further would draw more attention. She gave a sharp nod, her hand still locked on Anna's shoulder. She pushed the girl forward. Blue walked with them, his body positioned slightly behind Anna, as if shielding her from the woman who claimed to be her mother. The dog's movements were fluid and deliberate. He was a shadow, a silent promise. When they reached the alcove, David stopped. "Ma'am, please let go of the child." "I will not," Eleanor snapped. "She's frightened. You're frightening her." "Let go of her," David repeated. This time, it was not a request. Eleanor's eyes darted from David to Blue. The dog was sitting, but his muscles were coiled. He was watching her hands. Slowly, like she was handling a snake, Eleanor released Anna's shoulder. The moment she was free, Anna scrambled backward 2 steps, putting space between herself and the woman. She nearly tripped over Blue. The dog didn't move, just let the small girl press against his thick fur. It was a tiny, desperate gesture of seeking protection. David's heart ached. He knelt, putting himself on the child's level. He ignored Eleanor completely. "Hey," he said, his voice soft. "My name is David. And this big fella," he patted Blue's head. "This is Blue." Anna stared at the dog, her tear-filled eyes wide. She wiped her nose on the sleeve of her pink jacket. "He's a good boy," David said. "He's my partner. We're here to help." "We don't need help," Eleanor cut in. "We need to catch our train. I will be filing a formal complaint." "Badge number." "You'll get it, ma'am," David said, not looking up. He kept his focus on Anna. "That was a very interesting thing you were doing with your hand." "The tapping." Anna froze. She looked at Eleanor, her eyes full of terror. "She's a fidgety child," Eleanor said quickly. "She's always doing that. It's a nervous habit." David looked at Anna. Was it a nervous habit? Or was it a game? Anna's lower lip trembled. She looked from David's kind face to Blue's steady gaze. The dog blinked at her, slow and reassuring. "Who taught you that game?" David asked gently. Anna was silent for a long moment. The only sound was the distant echo of the station announcer. Then, she whispered one word. It was so quiet, David almost missed it. "Sarge." A jolt went through David. Sarge. It wasn't a name. It was a rank. A title. "Sarge," David prompted. "Is he a soldier?" Anna nodded, her blonde hair falling over her face. "He's my grandpa." "Your grandpa," David repeated. He felt a piece of the puzzle click into place. He had an uncle who was a vet. He knew the old codes, the old ways. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't Morse. It was simpler. It was a signal, a distress call. "I am here. I am in trouble." "You're a very smart girl," David said. "Sarge taught you well." A tiny flicker of pride, the first non-terrified emotion David had seen, crossed Anna's face. "I am her legal guardian." Eleanor's voice was getting shrill. People were starting to look. "This is kidnapping. You are kidnapping us." "Ma'am," David said, standing up to his full height. He was a wall between Eleanor and the child. "What is your name?" "Eleanor Vance. And I demand you let us go." "And the child's name?" "Anna. Anna Vance. She is my daughter." David looked down at the little girl. "Is your name Anna Vance?" Anna hesitated. She looked at Eleanor, who was glaring at her, a silent, terrifying command. The girl looked back at the floor. She gave a tiny, almost invisible shake of her head. "No." "I see," David said. His blood ran cold. He reached for the radio on his shoulder. "Ma'am, I am detaining you for a suspected parental abduction. You do not have the right to leave." "This is insane," Eleanor shrieked. "I have her papers. Her passport. We are going on vacation." "Then you won't mind if I see them," David said. "And you won't mind if I call your husband. Or the girl's father." Eleanor's face crumpled. The mention of a husband, of a father, hit a nerve. Her entire defense was built on a lie, and it was collapsing. I, she stammered. "Ma'am, hands behind your back." Eleanor Vance looked at the police officer. She looked at the dog, who was now on his feet, standing guard over the child. And she looked at the little girl who had brought her down with a silent, tapping hand. Her rage evaporated, replaced by a sudden, pathetic desperation. "Please," she whispered. "You don't understand. I need it." "You can tell me all about it at the station," David said. He unclipped his handcuffs. At that exact moment, 20 miles away, Mary Sullivan was wiping down a granite countertop. She was a slight woman, with the same blonde hair as her daughter, pulled back in a tight, practical ponytail. Her blue maid's uniform was spotless. Her hands were red and raw from cleaning chemicals. She worked for Mrs. Vance. She had worked for her for 2 years. The pay was good. It let her keep a small, clean apartment for her and Anna. Mrs. Vance had always been distant. She lived in a large, sterile house that felt more like a museum than a home. A house that had no children's laughter, no crayon marks on the walls. Mrs. Vance was polite, but cold. Until a month ago. Suddenly, Eleanor Vance had become interested in Anna. She had brought her gifts. A dress. A doll. "She's a lovely child, Mary," Eleanor had said, her smile thin. "So bright. She must be lonely, with you working so much." We do okay, ma'am, Mary had said, uncomfortable. Nonsense. Let me take her out. The museum. The zoo. It would be a treat for us both. Mary had been reluctant, but the pay was good, and Mrs. Vance was her boss. And Anna. Anna had been excited. This morning, Anna had climbed into Mrs. Vance's sleek black car, waving. Goodbye, Mommy. We're going to see the dinosaurs. Now, hours later, Mary was in Anna's small, tidy bedroom. She was folding her daughter's laundry. She opened a drawer to put away socks. And she saw it. Anna's favorite doll. A worn, one-eyed teddy bear she called Barnaby. Anna never went anywhere without Barnaby. Not to the store. Not to the park. And definitely not to the museum. A cold prickle of unease ran down Mary's back. She told herself she was being silly. Anna was excited. She just forgot. Mary went back to cleaning Mrs. Vance's home office. She bent down to empty the small paper basket under the desk. On top of the papers was a crumpled-up piece of notepaper. It was a flight confirmation. No, not a flight. A train itinerary. Grand Central Terminal to Albany. One way. 2 passengers. Departing today. Mary's breath caught in her chest. She stood up, her heart pounding. No, she whispered. She said the museum. She ran from the office, down the polished hall, to Eleanor Vance's bedroom. It was immaculate. The bed was made. The drawers were closed. Mary's eyes fell on the closet. She pulled the door open. A large section of the closet was empty. Hangers were bare. A space on the shoe rack, where Mrs. Vance kept her comfortable traveling shoes, was vacant. No, no, no. Mary's hands were shaking. She pulled her cheap cell phone from her pocket. She dialed Mrs. Vance's number. It went straight to voicemail. Mrs. Vance, this is Mary, she said, her voice high with rising panic. Please call me. I'm worried. I'm at the house. You're not at the museum, are you? Please, where is Anna? She hung up and dialed again. Voicemail. She ran to the front door, her mind racing. The museum. She could go to the museum. She could check. But she knew. Deep in her gut, she knew. The empty closet. The one-way train ticket. The forgotten bear. She looked at the clock on the wall. 10:45 a.m. The train on the itinerary was for 10:50 a.m. She was too late. Her daughter was gone. Mary collapsed against the wall, a sob tearing from her throat. She had no car. She had no one. Then she thought of her father. Sarge. He was old. He was quiet. But he was a soldier. He would know what to do. She scrambled to her feet, wiping her tears, and ran out the front door, dialing 911. My name is Mary Sullivan, she cried into the phone, running down the long, tree-lined driveway. My daughter. I think my boss has stolen my daughter. Back in the alcove at Grand Central, David was speaking into his radio. Central, this is K9 Miller. I have a confirmed parental abduction at the main concourse. I have one adult female in custody. The child is safe. Copy that. K9 Miller, the dispatcher's voice crackled back. Uniforms are en route to your location. Do you require further assistance? David looked at Anna. The little girl had finally let go of Blue. She was standing on her own, watching him, her small face pale, but her eyes no longer terrified. They were just watching, taking everything in. Negative, Central, David said. The scene is secure. My partner handled it. Eleanor Vance was silent, her shoulders slumped. The fight was gone. She was just a woman in an expensive coat, her wrists bound behind her. What happens now? Eleanor whispered. Now, David said, we wait for my colleagues. And we find your mother. He looked at Anna, giving her a small, reassuring smile. Your mom. What's her name? Mary, Anna said, her voice clear for the first time. Her name is Mary. Okay, Anna, David said. Let's call Mary. But as he reached for his phone, his radio crackled again. K9, Miller, new information coming in. We just received a 911 call from a Mary Sullivan. Reports her 8-year-old daughter, Anna, was abducted by her employer, an Eleanor Vance. The call originated from the Vance residence in Westchester. Can you confirm the child's identity? David looked at the small, blonde girl. The girl who had remembered her grandfather's lesson. The girl who had trusted a dog. That's a confirmed Central, David said, a wave of profound respect washing over him. The child is Anna Sullivan. She's right here. She's safe. And for the first time, Officer Blue relaxed. He sat down at David's side and let out a long, quiet sigh. His job done. The echo of the dispatcher's voice faded. For a moment, the vast noise of the terminal seemed to rush back in, filling the silence. Anna was shivering, despite the mild air in the station. The adrenaline that had kept her going for hours was gone, leaving a deep, bone-chilling cold. She stared at the handcuffs on Eleanor Vance's wrists. She stared at the police radio on David's shoulder. It was all real. 2 more transit officers, a man and a woman, arrived. They walked quickly, their faces serious. David met them a few steps away, keeping his voice low. "This is the suspect, Eleanor Vance," David explained. "And this," he nodded toward Anna, who was watching them with wide, silent eyes, "is the child, Anna Sullivan. The mother, Mary Sullivan, is in Westchester. She's the one who placed the 911 call." The female officer, Officer Chun, had a kind, square face. She looked past David at Anna. She saw the pink jacket, the pale cheeks, and the way the little girl was pressed against the canine's fur. Chun unclipped a small water bottle from her belt and walked over slowly, ignoring Eleanor. "Hi there," she said, her voice soft. "You look like you could use a drink of water." Anna looked at David, as if for permission. David nodded. "It's okay, Anna. These are my friends. They're here to help." Anna's small, trembling fingers took the bottle. She tried to twist the cap, but her hands were shaking too badly. Officer Chun knelt, her knees cracking, and gently took the bottle back. She twisted the cap and handed it over. "There you go, honey." Anna took a small, gasping sip. The water was cold. It felt real. The male officer took charge of Eleanor. "Ma'am, you'll come with me," he said, his voice void of emotion. Eleanor Vance did not resist. The fight was gone. She was a hollow shell, her expensive coat now looking like a costume. As the officer led her away, she turned her head. Her eyes found Anna. It was a strange look. It was not anger. It was a deep, aching hunger. A look of terrible loss. David stepped in the way, blocking her view. "Let's go, ma'am," he said to Officer Chun. "Let's get her to the substation." Out of the crowd. David motioned with his head. "Anna, you're going to come with me and Officer Blue. We're going somewhere quiet. We're going to wait for your mom." Anna nodded. She took one step, then another. Blue rose to his feet and walked beside her, his body a solid, warm presence. The little girl and the big dog walked side by side, a silent, shuffling procession, leaving the noise of the concourse behind. 20 miles away, Mary Sullivan was running. She was running down the long, paved driveway of the Vance estate. The manicured lawns and perfect flower beds blurred past. She was sobbing into her phone, talking to the 911 dispatcher. "My daughter. Anna. Please, you have to find her." The dispatcher's voice was trying to be calm. "Ma'am, please slow down. Where are you?" "I'm at the house. The Vance house. She took her. Her boss. She took my baby, ma'am," the dispatcher said, her voice suddenly sharp. "We have a report. A K9 unit at Grand Central Terminal. They have a child. An 8-year-old female, blonde hair. They have detained a woman named Eleanor Vance." Mary stopped dead in the middle of the road. Her legs gave out. She sat down hard on the asphalt, the phone clutched to her ear. "What? What did you say?" she whispered. "The child is safe, ma'am," the dispatcher repeated. "She is safe. With the police." The relief was so sudden, so total, it was like a physical blow. Mary couldn't breathe. She just wept, gulping in air. "She's safe. Oh, thank God. She's safe." After a moment, a new panic set in. "I have to get to her. I have to." She looked around. She was miles from the train station, miles from the city. She had no car. She had no money for a taxi. "Ma'am, we have units on the way to you now," the dispatcher said. "But you're in Westchester. It will take time to get you to the city." "No," Mary said, her mind clearing. "No, I can get there. I know who to call." She hung up with 911. Her fingers, slick with sweat, fumbled as she scrolled through her contacts. She found the name. "Dad." She pressed the call button. It rang once. Twice. "Mary girl. What's wrong?" His voice. It was 75 years old, gravelly from a life lived outdoors, but it was the strongest sound she knew. "Dad," she sobbed. "It's Anna. Someone. Mrs. Vance." She took Anna. She tried to take her on a train. There was a dead silence on the line. Not a silence of confusion. It was a silence of pure, cold focus. "Where is Anna now?" Sarge asked. "She's safe. The police have her. At Grand Central. A K9 officer found her." "Dad." I'm at the house. I can't. I have no way to get to her. Stay put, Sarge said. The gravel in his voice had turned to steel. I'm 10 minutes from you. I'm coming. We'll go get my granddaughter. The line clicked. He was gone. Mary stood up on shaking legs. She walked to the end of the long driveway and stood by the stone gates, watching the road. She had never been so scared, and she had never been so grateful for her father. The transit police substation was a small, bright room. It smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. It was an office, not a place for children. Anna sat on a hard plastic bench, her feet not touching the floor. Officer Chun had draped a thick, gray blanket over her shoulders. It was heavy, and the weight felt good. Blue was lying at her feet. He was no longer the rigid, alert officer. He was just a dog. He had placed his heavy head on top of Anna's worn-out sneakers. His breathing was a low, rhythmic huff. David was on the phone, his back to her, speaking in a low voice. He was talking to the Westchester police, confirming Mary's location. That's right, David said. The grandfather is picking her up. Sarge Sullivan. They're en route. He listened. Yes. She's fine. A little shaken, but honestly, she's tougher than I am. He hung up and turned. He sat on the bench, a few feet from Anna. He didn't crowd her. Okay, kiddo, he said, his voice soft. Your mom is on her way. And your grandpa, too. Anna looked up. It was the first time she had made direct eye contact. Sarge is coming? That's right, David smiled. I heard he's the one who taught you that trick. The tapping. Anna nodded, her fingers tracing the pattern on her own leg. That was military, David said, his voice full of respect. Old school. I'm surprised you knew it. I'm surprised I recognized it. Sarge said it was for emergencies, Anna whispered. He said if you can't talk, you tap. He said the right people would know. He was right, David said. Although, I have to admit, I'm not the one who caught it. My partner did. Anna looked down at the big, furry head on her feet. Blue's tail thumped once on the linoleum floor. He's a good dog, Anna said. He's the best dog, David said. Anna slowly, cautiously, reached out her hand. She didn't touch the dog, not yet. She just held her hand in the air, near his nose. Blue, without lifting his head, sniffed her fingers. Then he pushed his cold, wet nose gently into her palm. Anna let out a shaky breath. A tiny smile touched the corners of her mouth. It was the first smile David had seen. He likes me, she said. He sure does, David said. He knew you were special. He knew you were a soldier, just like your grandpa. The little girl sat up a bit straighter. The word soldier seemed to give her a little piece of herself back. She wasn't just a lost girl. She was a soldier. In a room down the hall, the atmosphere was very different. The room was small, gray. Detective Harris had left Eleanor Vance alone with her thoughts for 10 long minutes. The anger was gone. The desperation had cooled into a numb, vacant stare. When Harris re-entered, he was holding a single piece of paper. His face was no longer stern. It was a mask of deep, professional sadness. I ran a wider search, Mrs. Vance, Harris said, his voice quiet. He sat down opposite her. Not just financials. Public records. Vitals. Eleanor didn't look up. You didn't just try for a child for 10 years, did you? He asked gently. You had one. Eleanor's head snapped up. Her eyes were suddenly sharp, full of a pain so raw it was shocking. You have no right, she whispered. Harris placed the paper on the table and turned it to face her. It was a printout of a simple online record. A death certificate. Emily Vance, Harris said, reading the name. Died 14 months ago. Malignant brain tumor. She was 7 years old. Eleanor stared at the name. Emily, she breathed. I found a photo, too, Harris said, his voice heavy with pity. In a social services database. From a fundraiser. She had blonde hair. She was small for her age. She looked just like Anna Sullivan. The dam broke. It was not the shriek of a frustrated woman. It was the howl of a mother. A sound of absolute, bottomless grief that echoed in the small room. Eleanor collapsed onto the table, her body shaking with sobs that seemed to be torn from her very soul. They looked the same, she choked out, her words muffled. I saw her. I saw her in the market with her mother a month ago. It was her. It was my Emily come back. She was right there. Harris let her cry for a long moment. This was the truth. Not a crime of envy, but a crime of madness. A crime born from a grief so powerful it had shattered her mind. Her husband left her 2 months ago, Harris said, speaking to the empty air as he processed it. A year after the child died. He couldn't take the grief. She was left alone. In that house. That tomb, as she called it. He said I was empty. Eleanor whispered, her voice broken. He said I was a ghost. But I wasn't. I saw my baby. And she was being raised by a maid. She was wearing old shoes. She wasn't being cared for. The world, it made a mistake. It took my daughter and gave her to someone who couldn't appreciate her. So you decided to fix the mistake, Harris said. She belongs with me. Eleanor screamed, her head flying up. Her eyes were wild, her face slick with tears. She is my daughter. Her name is Emily. Harris stood up. He had seen enough. The rage and calculation were gone. All that was left was a deeply broken woman, lost in a fantasy she had built to survive. Her name is Anna, Mrs. Vance, he said, his voice firm but not cruel. And she has a mother who is on her way right now. A mother who loves her very much. He left the room and closed the door, leaving Eleanor Vance alone with the ghost of her child. The journey to the city was a blur of steel and stone. Sarge drove his old, immaculately kept pickup truck. He drove like he did everything, with a calm, unhurried focus. He did not speed. He did not weave through traffic. He simply moved, a solid, unshakable object, toward his objective. Mary sat in the passenger seat. She was the opposite. Her hands were twisted together in her lap, her knuckles white. She stared out the windshield, her body vibrating with a terrible, frantic energy. He's an old man, Dad, she whispered, her voice tight. He's 75. What if he wasn't strong enough? What if he— You're spinning, Mary girl, Sarge said, his voice a low rumble. He did not take his eyes off the road. Stop. The dispatcher said she is safe. We hold on to that. We don't borrow trouble. Not until we see it. She's so little. Mary choked, a fresh wave of tears blurring the highway. She must have been so scared. Alone, with that woman. She was not alone, Sarge said. The words were a flat statement of fact. She's your daughter. But she's my granddaughter. She's a Sullivan. She knows what to do. Mary looked at her father. His face was a map of wrinkles, his gray hair cut short and severe. He was just an old man. But in that moment, his certainty was the only thing holding her together. They reached the city. The noise was overwhelming. Horns, sirens, the rush of a million people. Sarge navigated the streets leading to Grand Central with an old, familiar skill. He found the police in trance, parked the truck in a no-parking zone, and put an old, faded veteran placard on his dashboard. They can tow it if they want, he said, cutting the engine. Let's go. Mary was out of the truck before he finished the sentence. She ran toward the building, her heart a drum against her ribs. Sarge followed, his stride long and steady. Inside, the terminal was a shock. After the quiet of the truck, the roar of the concourse was deafening. Where are they? Mary cried, turning in a circle. The crowd was a sea of strangers. Sarge put a hand on her elbow. Stop. Look, he pointed. A transit police officer stood near a digital schedule board. Sarge walked directly to him. Mary hurried to keep up. Officer, Sarge said. His voice cut through the noise. The young officer turned. He saw the old man's military bearing. He saw the woman's terrified, tear-streaked face. We're here for a child, Sarge said. Anna Sullivan. The officer's expression changed instantly from boredom to serious concern. Yes, sir. We just got the word. She's in the substation. Right this way. He led them through a door marked, authorized personnel only. The noise of the terminal was instantly cut in half. They were in a long, beige hallway. She's in the family room, the officer said. She's with the K-9 officer who found her. She's fine. Mary didn't hear him. She only heard the word Anna. She saw the door at the end of the hall. She broke into a run. She pushed the door open so hard it banged against the wall. And the world stopped. Anna was sitting on a hard plastic bench. She was wrapped in a gray blanket, her small feet dangling above the floor. A big German shepherd was lying at her feet. A tall police officer was sitting near her, speaking in a low, kind voice. Anna's head snapped up. Her eyes, wide and dull with shock, suddenly flooded with light. Mommy! The word was a tiny, broken sound. Mary crossed the room in 2 steps. She fell to her knees on the linoleum floor. She pulled Anna off the bench and into her arms, crushing the small girl against her chest. Oh, Anna! Mary sobbed. burying her face in her daughter's blonde hair. My baby, you're here. You're safe. Anna's arms locked around Mary's neck. She held on with a desperate, unchildlike strength. She made no sound. She just held on, her small body shaking violently. This was the one person in the world who was real. This was home. She. Mary tried to speak, tried to ask, but she couldn't form the words. She just held her daughter, rocking back and forth, her tears soaking Anna's pink jacket. It's okay. Mommy's here. It's okay. I've got you. Sarge had entered the room behind her. He stood in the doorway, his old, sharp eyes taking in the entire scene in a single, sweeping glance. He saw his daughter, crumpled on the floor, holding his granddaughter. He saw the half-empty water bottle. He saw the gray blanket. He saw the kind, tired face of Officer Chun, who was standing in the corner. He saw the tall K-9 officer, David, who had respectfully stood up. And he saw the dog. The German shepherd had not moved. He had not barked. He had not stood. He simply lay on the floor, his head on his paws, watching the reunion. His tail gave one slow thump. David stepped forward, giving the family a moment. Mrs. Sullivan? Mary looked up, her face a mess of tears and relief. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. I don't know how. Was she? She's okay, David said, his voice full of a deep, weary kindness. She's shaken, but she's perfectly okay. You have a very, very smart daughter. Mary just nodded, unable to speak, and kissed the top of Anna's head. Sarge stepped fully into the room. He closed the door, bringing a final, quiet click to the scene. His eyes met David's. It was a look of mutual respect. A man in a uniform to a man who had worn one for a lifetime. Sarge gave a short, sharp nod. Officer. Sir, David replied. Sarge walked over to the bench. He didn't crowd Mary. He put one large, weathered hand on his daughter's shaking shoulder. Then he looked at Anna, who was peeking out from under her mother's arm. You did good, Anna Bug, Sarge said, his voice rough. You did real good. You remembered the game. A tiny, watery smile flickered on Anna's face. She nodded against her mother's chest. I tapped, Sarge. I tapped and tapped. I was scared. Being scared is part of it, Sarge said. But you did it anyway. That's the other part. That's the brave part. Anna's gaze moved from her grandfather. She pointed a small, trembling finger. He saw me, Sarge. He saw me tapping. Mary and Sarge both followed her finger. She was not pointing at Officer David. She was pointing at Blue. Sarge's attention, which had already noted the dog, now locked onto him. He truly saw the animal for the first time. The intelligence in his eyes. The calm, disciplined posture. The way he watched over Anna, even now. Sarge was an old soldier. He knew dogs. He had served with K-9 units. He had seen what they could do. He walked slowly over to the dog. David tensed, just for a second. Blue was a working dog. He wasn't a pet. But Sarge knew this. He didn't reach out to pet him. He didn't use a high, friendly voice. He simply stood before the dog, as one soldier would to another. You're a good soldier, Sarge said, his voice low. You heard the call, didn't you? Blue, sensing the respect, the shared understanding, lifted his head. His ears flicked forward. He looked at the old man. Sarge looked at David. This signal, the tap tap tap. She told me you taught her, David said. An old soldier's signal. More than that, Sarge said, his eyes still on Blue. It was a signal from my old unit. K-9 Corps. Back in a long time ago. It's how we signaled our handlers in the dark. If we were trapped, we'd tap on the ground. The dogs were trained to feel the vibration, to hear what no human could. A look of dawning comprehension crossed David's face. My God. But how could he know? He's not trained for that. He didn't know the code, Sarge said, a deep respect in his voice. He knew the call. He knew a human was in distress. He saw a pattern. He saw a child signaling for help. He's a true partner. Sarge looked at Blue. He extended his hand, palm down. Blue sniffed the weathered knuckles. And then, in the quiet, sterile office, Sarge Sullivan did something that made Officer Chin's breath catch. He drew himself up to his full, ramrod-straight height. He brought his hand to his temple in a sharp, formal military salute. He was not saluting the officer. He was saluting the K-9, a soldier honoring a fellow soldier. Blue seemed to understand. He let out a soft woof of air, and his tail thumped twice on the floor. Mary had finally, gently, separated from Anna. She was wiping her daughter's face with a tissue Officer Chun had given her. "We need to go home, Dad. I want to take her home." David nodded. "You will. Very soon. The woman, Eleanor Vance, is in custody. She's been arrested. She's not going anywhere." Mary's knees buckled. "Arrested? Oh, thank God. You will have to give a formal statement, ma'am," David said gently. "But not right this second. We can have an officer from your local precinct come to your home tomorrow. For tonight, you just be her mom." "Thank you," Mary whispered. It was all she could say. "Thank you." Sarge helped his daughter to her feet. Mary picked up Anna, who was half asleep, her body heavy with exhaustion and relief. They prepared to leave. Anna, wrapped in the gray blanket, was a small bundle in her mother's arms. As they reached the door, Anna stirred. She looked over her mother's shoulder. "Wait," she whispered. Mary stopped. Anna wiggled to be put down. Her feet touched the floor. She was unsteady, but she walked back. First, she walked to David. She stood in front of him and looked up. "Thank you, Officer David." David knelt. "You're welcome, Anna. You were the brave one." Then, Anna turned to Blue. She walked right up to the big German shepherd. She was not afraid. Not anymore. She put her small arms around his thick, muscular neck and hugged him. She pressed her cheek against his fur. "Thank you, Blue," she whispered. "You're the best dog." Blue, in a rare break of professional conduct, leaned his entire body into the small girl's hug. He turned his head and gave her hand a single, gentle lick. Anna giggled. It was a watery, tired sound, but it was a giggle. It was the most beautiful sound in the world. She went back to her mother's arms. Sarge walked to David and gripped his hand. The old man's handshake was like a vice. "You have a fine partner, son. You take care of him." "Yes, sir. I will," David said. "And you, sir," David said, looking at Sarge, "you take care of her. She is a very special kid." Sarge looked at Anna, now nested securely with her mother. A rare, small smile touched his face. "She's a Sullivan," he said. The door clicked shut, leaving the small office in silence. Officer Chun let out a long, slow breath. "Well, in 20 years, I've never seen anything like that. A military salute. For a dog." David Miller leaned back against the wall. He felt like he had run a marathon. His legs were heavy. He was tired, right down to his bones. "Sarge wasn't saluting a dog, Chun," David said, his voice quiet. "He was saluting a soldier." And he was right. He looked at his partner. Blue had stood up and was stretching, his whole body wiggling in a long, satisfying arc. The tension of the last 2 hours was finally leaving him. "That signal," David said, almost to himself. "A K-9 core signal. From what? Vietnam? Korea? An old, forgotten piece of history. And that little girl knew it," Chin said, shaking her head in wonder. "Her grandfather taught it to her, just in case." "Who does that?" "A man who has seen the world for what it is," David said. He slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor. He was too tired to stand. Blue ambled over and nudged David's hand with his cold nose. "You knew, didn't you, boy?" David murmured, scratching the dog behind his ears. Blue leaned into the touch, his eyes closing in contentment. "You didn't just smell fear. You didn't just smell the adrenaline from that Vance woman. You saw her. You saw that little hand moving." David replayed the moment in his mind. The crowd, the noise, and that one, tiny, rhythmic movement. "You saw a pattern," David whispered. "And you knew it was wrong. You knew it was a call. You heard her when she couldn't even make a sound." Officer Chun watched the two partners. "You two are quite a pair." She smiled, a small, weary smile. "I'll go write up the report. You, just take a minute." She left. The room was quiet again. "Come on, partner," David said, pulling himself to his feet. "Let's go. End of shift. We're going home." That evening, the city felt 1,000 miles away. Mary Sullivan's apartment was small. The furniture was old but clean. It smelled of chicken soup and lavender soap. It was a home. Anna was in her own bed, in her small room. She was deep in the sleep of pure exhaustion. She was wearing her favorite pajamas, the ones with the faded yellow ducks, tucked tightly in her arms. Held with the same fierce grip she had used on her mother, was her one-eyed teddy bear, Barnaby. Mary sat at the tiny kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a hot mug of tea. The shaking had finally stopped, but she still felt cold. Sarge sat on the sofa, watching the local news on a small television. The volume was low. The anchor was talking about a fire. It all seemed meaningless. She hasn't let go of that bear, Mary said, her voice barely a whisper. She was watching her daughter through the open bedroom door. It's her anchor, Sarge replied, not taking his eyes from his granddaughter. She's grounding herself. She'll be okay, Mary girl. Mary looked at her father. His profile was strong in the dim lamplight. She was so brave, Dad. She was, Sarge agreed. But she shouldn't have had to be. A shadow of cold, hard anger passed over his face. Anger at Eleanor Vance. Anger at a world that could let this happen. I was so stupid. Mary choked, a fresh wave of guilt hitting her. I let her go. I trusted that woman. I put her in danger, all because I didn't want to lose my job. Sarge got up from the sofa. He walked to the table and sat across from his daughter. He put his large, scarred hands over hers. They were warm and strong. Stop that, he said, his voice firm but not unkind. This is not your fault. You are a good mother. You work hard to give that child a life. You did not. You could not know what was in that woman's heart. Evil hides, Mary. It hides behind money and polite smiles. That is not on you. He squeezed her hands. What matters is what happened next. You found out. You called. And Anna remembered. What we teach our children, what we give them. We never know when it will be the thing that saves them. Mary's tears, which had been tears of fear all day, were now tears of gratitude. Thank you, Dad, for teaching her. For just being you. Family comes, Sarge said. It's the only rule that matters. Now, drink your tea. She will wake up, and she will be hungry. And we will be here. Mary nodded. She drank the tea. It was warm. She was home. Her daughter was safe. The patrol car moved through the dark, quiet streets. The city was winding down. David Miller was driving home. His shift had ended 3 hours late. In the back, Blue was asleep. His breathing was a low, rhythmic snore. He was dreaming. His paws twitched, as if he were running. David looked at his partner in the rearview mirror. The bond between them was strange. It was not the love he had for his wife. It was not the love he had for his kids. It was something else. It was a bond of absolute, unspoken trust. Blue was a dog, but he was also an officer. He was a guardian. David thought about the complexity of the day. He thought of Eleanor Vance, a woman so broken by what she didn't have that she tried to steal what wasn't hers. He thought of Mary, her raw panic and her powerful love. He thought of Sarge, an old warrior passing his wisdom down to a little girl. And he thought of Anna, a small child, trapped in a nightmare, who did not scream. She did not cry. She signaled. The world was full of noise. People shouting, horns blaring, announcements echoing. So much noise that it was easy to get lost. It was easy for a small, frightened whisper to be drowned out. But today it wasn't. Today, in the middle of all that chaos, a little girl had sent a signal. An old soldier's code, a silent tap for help. And a dog, with a heart as brave as any man's, had heard her. David reached back and rested his hand on Blue's sleeping head. Good boy, he whispered. Good soldier. Blue didn't wake, but his tail thumped once in the dark. He knew. He had done his job. He had brought the lost one home. And that's where we'll pause our story today. Whenever I release one of these stories, I hope it gives you a moment to step away from the usual routine and just float for a while. I'm curious about where you were and what you were up to while listening. Maybe you were enjoying a warm drink, relaxing outside, or winding down for the night. Share a note in the comments, because I truly do read each one. If you'd like to make sure you catch the next story, tapping like and subscribing really helps us stay connected. We're always working to make these stories better, so your thoughts and feedback are always welcome down below. Thanks for spending part of your day with me.